We're
This
going to start it
conference will
just
now
now.
be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Now we've got it.
Okay, thank you. I can
Okay,
go on,
back to
right?
you.
Okay.
Yep.
Recently in Ontario and in central Canada, we bounced back. In the last 3-4 years, we've seen strong numbers. We've seen Americans coming back. We've seen record-breaking numbers from overseas visitors from China, India, Mexico, and others. So good were the numbers that the supply in the hotel industry was overtaking demand in 2019 and continuing in 2020. I was talking to a few owners and general managers. They were crying because their numbers were down in 2019 versus 2018, a year before. The reason was there was more supply. They still had to come up with budgets. COVID-19 is different. It's different in many regards, and it's more severe. It is a health, a social, and economic pandemic, all three combined. It has the ability to touch every area of the globe, and that's our feeder markets, and does not separate one nation over another. It has shown us how the world is susceptible and vulnerable, even though we can land on the moon and most probably soon on Mars. It has many unknowns because it's an invisible enemy. The strength of hospitality has been attacked right in the heart. Hospitality is about people's experiences, people's gatherings, people networking, celebrating, enjoying themselves, having fun, whether attending a convention or sitting in the bar ordering a martini or having a dinner. Hospitality is about people and bringing people together. So let me start with a new restaurant. But before we even do that, talking about opening, it should be noted that many in the industry are still dealing with the serious financial implications of closing their doors forever. It's about liquidity and paying the rent. Those are two ulcers. Due to the size of this catastrophe, we know the solution, and the only solution is a sizable cash infusion dedicated specifically to hospitality. And this has been tough. High on the list is replacing the existing flawed rent program, one that works for both landlords and tenants, because either party is not happy. The government and the federal government, who has the money, has not supported any specific sector. You might hear funding given to some sectors, but all it is loans under unique names. Similar loans the hospitality industry has been tapping into, which have to be paid back. And that's the issue, the deferrals. Between food service and accommodations, the industry in Ontario lost 60% of its workforce, close to 250,000 workers. With reopening up Ontario, with no business, it will start slow. Many will be faced with paying off government deferral costs and the loans, as well as startup expenses, opening up expenses, whether you're a hotel or a restaurant, such as payroll and supplies, inventory stock. There will be extra costs in sanitization and cleaning, even technology, as everyone will be dealing with distancing and touchless practices. And don't forget the anticipated increases, regretfully, in food prices. So revenues will be down, new costs will arrive. So from an advocating perspective, our focus now is on reducing what we might call traditional expenses to slim down the costs in areas such as introducing beverage alcohol, wholesale pricing, expand the qualification criteria for the Ontario energy rebate, because in the past, government policies have only been incentivizing the large industrial players and the very, very small business, period, and most lie in between. Initiate favorable changes to the municipal accommodation tax, make the beverage alcohol delivery permanent, and we were the ones that drove the temporary allowance of that till the end of January. lowering WSIB premium rates, and we've already had meetings with the president and chair of WSIB. And this is an idea that came from our industry. We're pushing to allow business to expense restaurant meals at 100% from the current 50% on-premise dining. This we feel will stimulate visitation to restaurants.
Supposed to come yesterday morning.
And what the government wants is vibrancy. And we need incentives to drive people out there.
On a Wednesday.
I think somebody's unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's already scheduled, so I'm hoping for tomorrow. Fuck it, so
If everyone
we need
can
it so bad.
mute their audio, we can continue. Thank you.
Oh, let me, stop it, no. Why can I not hear that?
I'm muted too. Or you're muted, Tony. I can't hear you.
And press me mute. I've unmuted myself now. I'm fine.
So make yourself comfortable however you want. That is the dog couch. Would you rather have this one?
That's fun.
Can you hear
Really?
me?
Because I'm going to take my shoes off and lay down. So
Jane, you have to mute yourself. Jane, you have to mute yourself.
oh dear, Jane, that's me.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. So as I was saying, the consumer always drives trends, and this is no different as it is. Every sector in the hospitality needs to reopen to the new norm, even if they are open. Hotels have been classified essential, and many stayed open. But the operation in the new will be different, especially when they open their food and beverage operations and conference rooms. And resorts are not any different. Restaurants were mandated as the first business to close, and much of the emphasis of reopening focuses around rules designed for food operations when we're talking about opening and new. The government of Ontario recently released a 3-stage plan of reopening. There are 2 to 4 weeks separating each stage before further loosening takes effect. This week, we just entered the first stage, and Ontario is a bit more cautious than Quebec. And out west, you have provinces that really haven't felt the heartbreaks we felt, and that's the reason they're ahead of the game. It is my hope that by mid-June, we will start to see outdoor patios and perhaps restaurants with distancing rules open up. Small group meetings perhaps will follow, with large facility type conferences moving most probably into late 2020 or early 2021. Large and very large conventions, we might not even see them in 2021. And it all depends on the health performance. And the industry is eager. It is ready to open. The only government rule that has come out is the 2 meter or 6 feet distancing rule. That's the only rule. We have been working with various governments to allow extension of outdoor patios to streets, empty lots, green spaces, and we have received favorable responses from the AGCO and from municipalities we talked to. They're already announcing it in the news over this last week and a half. Extending outdoor space will temporarily help make up some of the seating capacity loss due to the distancing rules. And recently, I've chaired a sub-panel for the ministry, for government, on recommendations of how the industry should open, and hopefully we'll start seeing some activity from that. It seems that North America jurisdictions are initially opening at 50% capacity in restaurants, but we are challenging this. It will be a tough challenge, but we think there should be flexibility. It should be on location specific, which can be determined on the type of floor layout and on various protective room designs that are there. Example are sushi type bars, or if you recall, the 50s type diners where this can operate safely with enclosed booths. I seen a photo a week ago in a restaurant in Norway overlooking a body of water. Beautiful sight. Each of the tables are all enclosed in a glass cage. Aesthetically looking good, and the diners can be safe while they enjoy their dinner. This is just one idea that it can increase the 50% capacity rule that's there now. And with regards to group meetings, a critical path schedule projection to understand the allowed group size of conferences has not been developed by government. This brings concerns with existing business in the books and that are reserved today in the later part of the year. Concerns for hotels and for the meeting planners, and even for social events such as weddings. It's about the dilemma of when to cancel the business if it has to be canceled. And of course, the cancellation fee decisions and the options that business and planners make around that. Another dilemma is the lack of understanding of travel restrictions, including interprovincial travel and any restrictions that might be planned to be there in the future. We are waiting for an answer on that from the Ministry of Health. Let's now talk about the actual operation and really the meat of the matter, opening up. There has been such a good job done, and one would argue that it had to be done, in scaring the consumer to stay home. No doubt, the biggest obstacle for hotels and restaurants will be building trust to the consumer. Hospitality leaders need to adopt, and they, along with their employees, embrace new ways of service. Hospitality leaders need to reassure their guests that they are taking the proper safety measures and they are taking them seriously. And this are not just listening and saying it, but acting upon it. Building trust with employees and trust with guests, both are equally important in the new norm. How do we do it? Let me go into a few specifics. Health and safety practices must guide the day-to-day operation, and the likes of sanitizing must be consistent. We can't cut corners. Sometimes our industry is noted for cutting corners. This sanitizing practices must be evident, especially if the guest sees them. That's how trust is built. Providing signage for directions. In restaurants, consider replacing menu chalkboards with digital signage. Provide condiments in single-use disposable packages or individual small dishes. During service, this avoids bottles, shakers, and pieces of multiple items that people may touch. Install a transparent barrier at your host or hostess stand, something grocery stores have done well. Consider offering packaged cutlery to guests who prefer it. Remove all shared service bar items so people don't touch them. If payments are made through servers, consider touchless methods such as tapping with cards and phones. Print disposable menus and or placement style menus. Or better yet, and this is where business will rapidly grow, transition to mobile web-based menus, simply creating a QR barcode directed to the menu-specific web page. Very, very, very small in the expense side. More and more will move to technology, believe me, into the digital age, especially with the takeout and delivery growth that's upon us. These are only a few of the ideas, and you'll find more ideas, lots more ideas, in a new guide that we released today from All Days. We released it, and the reopening of a restaurant is listed under the Dine Safe label and can be accessed through the www.dinesafe.ca site. There are many guides developed recently. We've been inundated with them. The information in this guide is easy to follow. It's informative and very helpful. And it has all the best practices, including any government guidelines. While some of the resource pages are under development, the topics in the resource page range from PPE, financial thinking, and break-even points when you make decisions, and employee practices, including videos. Guests and staff alike will be evaluating every element of the experience when they walk into a restaurant or hotel. This has not been done like this before. From approaching the restaurant and be seated to dining and paying. More critically, throughout the reopening transition. With guests first visiting, they'll be assessing how safe and enjoyable their experience was, and will likely share that and share their impression with others. And you know, we always look at opportunities when crises are upon us. This is an opportunity to make positive and a lasting impact so you get them back. It's a new paradigm, no doubt about it. And the hotel and food service industry as a whole, individually and as a collective, will be more successful if we recognize that behaviors and expectations have changed. And we need to adapt and embrace them. This is the new norm. Hotels are already, many of the brands are now updating hygiene processes to ensure a healthy environment for its guests and its employees. The new norms include enhanced sanitation, including incorporating total fumigation, performing deep cleaning for guest rooms, especially in those very, very touchable areas like remote controls, light switches. And don't forget to do them when the hotel guests or the restaurant guests are there by disinfecting public spaces. This is what they want to see. They want to know and they want to understand that you know that you have health and safety practices as a top priority. And while essential practices need to be implemented, and I would call them basic, competition will dictate, will initiate other desirable health and safety practices, such as fumigation, checking temperature with your staff. It's important to convey and communicate one's practices to the consumer. I cannot emphasize that. This is how trust will be achieved. And it's really a time to differentiate a business. We've seen it already with grocery stores. Communicate, be transparent. It's an opportunity to grow loyalty even more. Let me talk a bit about the employees.
So, sorry, Tony, could you give us that website that you referred to just a little while ago?
Absolutely. I can have Lori send it to everyone as well. But it's dinesafe.ca, dinesafe.ca. And if you can't find it, give us an email. Send us an email on the ORHMA website, which you can easily find, and we'll make sure.
Tony,
It's
it's
on the
Lori.
chat.
We will also be ensuring that this is available through our website, tourismtalk.ca.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about employees. Employees who have been recalled to work from a temporary layoff are required to return within a reasonable time. And I've checked with many lawyers on this. If they don't return, it is viewed that the employee may be deemed to have abandoned the job and will lose their right to statutory termination pay. So just something, I'm not a lawyer, but this is what lawyers are telling us. And we've had, some of the top employment lawyers over several weeks speak to the industry, members and non-members, and you're welcome to join us when we have the next ones, because we have good insights of that at no charge whatsoever. These team members we're talking about, your employees, are the faces of the business. Their safety, their well-being should be a key priority, no doubt about it. Remember now, they are also now on the front line, not just health workers. They are taking risks. Designate a staff member on every shift to oversee the cleaning and sanitation practices. Initiate training and set your expectations, because if you have the passion and the will to do them, it's all up to the employees. You know that's management. So make sure that you convey the new norm, that it is a touchless and distancing operation. That's the best way to look at it. Ask for their input in ideas that it can be part of that experience and the new norm. Should a staff member have any symptoms, they should be expected to stay at home make sure you have policies now more than ever on that. Ensure there's a policy with sick employees in that, because someone coughing repeatedly in the workplace sends the wrong message to guests and to employees, to the other employees. And consider pre-shift temperature checks for all staff with touchless thermometers. Those that do it, they will make the employees comfortable, and they will make the guests comfortable, and make sure you let the world know about it. That's a key area. Consider face visors. And that's my personal opinion. I think the masks that we see are not suited for the health industry, and this mask has been tossed up and down. Do we need a mask or we don't? I feel the visors, the acrylic or glass type visors are better for front house staff as well as for back house staff when they expect to be within 2 meters of each other. And there are other factors to consider. You know, once a week, I go to my local supermarket for groceries. I don't see empty shelves any longer. I do see large containers for eggs. You know, I see different type of flour bags, no name brand flour bags, new packaging for farm potatoes, and the list goes on. Well, the food chain has been faced with tremendous pressures to adjust to high consumption, and practically without restaurant orders. With the closure of restaurants, food providers ended up either throwing their perishable stock away, donating it to the food banks, and supplying the supermarket shelves. That's why we see all these different type products. So what does this mean for restaurants? When restaurants open up, don't expect your distributor to fulfill all your menu needs. Much food specified for restaurants, along with the packaging, has run out. And I've talked to the providers and the food processors and manufacturers that have to do with food and beverage associations, and they're concerned. Food providers in the food chain will have a harder time, they're telling me, to transition back to supplying restaurants than when they adjusted their logistics to stock empty grocery shelves. And we know that was a madhouse. It was crazy. So before you open, have a talk with your distributor. And don't forget to reduce the amount of items featured on your menu. Slim menus are in. Large menus are out. The cost alone. A reduction in the menu will reduce your inventory stock, your food waste, and you need to save. If priced right, your direct cost will also come down, but also your payroll in preparation and the execution. Examining and reducing expenses must be part of your planning. For example, large players will need to reduce overhead. There's no way around it. The revenues will not be there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, till a medical breakthrough appears, the new norm will not be what has been used to, we have been used to, but we will still, you know, I see successes already. We'll still prevail as a service industry offering hospitality to many. You know, I heard from the president of Marriott, they're starting to see occupancies up in southern states because the weather is warmer there. We haven't had warmer weather yet. I've seen promotions done out in the resort area of Alberta, North Alberta and British Columbia. And since the promotion started, they're starting to see occupancies pick up. It's not what it used to be, but the warm weather is not upon us yet. So I do have faith in this industry. Although we've been hit hard, we'll adopt new practices and we'll come of it stronger, different, but stronger. And again, this is about resurgence. It's about industry ready to open slowly but surely. And by doing that, we'll be building consumer confidence. We just need to ensure that we think this in a re-engineering view and I guess reimagining the hospitality operation in the new norm. We've seen, and I mentioned at the start, that's the reason I started with some economic downturns before that we recovered. And some of them were like 10 years, 15 years. Now, this is much more severe. Let's face reality. But this industry is creative. And importantly, and I've been in this industry all my life, it is operated by many savvy individuals. I know success will come just from their own creativity, as we start seeing now. That's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I apologize for talking too long in solo.
No, that's fine. Tony, I just, I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit for the accommodators who are on today's call
Yes.
on how it's going to look different for them, what their processes will look like, what changes they'll need to be paying attention to and making with their staff, and with basically how they're going to be operating.
Well, most of the items I talked about really fit the hotel as well. There's not much difference, especially those that have food and beverage operations. It's all about sanitization. It's about practices that have to do with cleaning. It's about ensuring that there's communication with your guests, communication with your employees. If there is a time to really put employee satisfaction on top of the list, this is it. And I always believe that a successful hotel or any business operates when they have happy employees. This is it, because you need them to be part of your new norm and the operation. We've already seen the brands implement some of the activities I talked about, like fumigation. They implement hygiene and cleaning procedures. And yes, they have been able to tell their guests. I've seen already emails going out from the major brands, the Hiltons, IHG, Marriott's, and they are making sure their actions is where their mouth is, by stating that we work with this health entity and that health entity, and we ensure that we have a training manual that our employees in the hotel are going to follow from A to Z, and there's going to be staff meetings every morning just on the cleaning and sanitizing practices. So a lot of that all falls the same. I think you're going to see technology. If we thought it was skyrocketing in its growth, we're going to see it much more. You're going to see guests not going to the front desk to check in. It's going to be like flying a plane with your cell phone, opening your room, making reservations, starting there, checking in, and going into your room through your cell phone. I can see that happening, and fast. And back to the menus again. I can see mobile menus being the in thing, and hard menus going out.
Perfect. Thanks, Tony. I'm going to go through some of the questions that have come up in the chat room so far. It sounds like we've got quite a few B operators on the call with us today. Do you have any inside information, Tony, that you can share with us as to whether or not you think B&Bs will be opening anytime soon?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because when the government passed out the essential business list, they listed short-term rentals as non-essential. So there hasn't been any conversation on that, truly, that I know of. I know some of the short-term rental companies are trying to reinvent themselves as well. I think we'll probably see it in stage 3, perhaps, but not in the next stage, but perhaps the stage after that, which will be about 8 weeks. That's how that, and that's just sort of estimate.
And just to thank you, Tony, and just to take that a little bit further, we have someone asking about cottage resorts and roofed accommodation providers. When do you feel that?
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. When do you feel that they may be coming back online to reopen?
Yeah, the word resort is a bit confusing, and I've talked this with several individuals. There are resorts that are open now. So to me, the interpretation is the accommodation sector, hotel specifically, is essential business. And I always looked at the accommodation part of the resort being essential, and it's open. There's no difference. The food and beverage operations, the meetings, the golf courses, that's a different category. So I've always interpreted that the hotel portion where people go in and sleep is open. That's my interpretation. And I've seen resorts actually being open through this. Now, the food and beverage operations would only open when the restaurants open. And the meeting rooms would open, again, more later in the year, or as we more or less obtain confidence in restaurants, and then they will elevate the size of group to meet. And that's going more into the later part of summer, I would think. The golf courses are already open now. And for those that, if there's any operators here running golf courses, by the way, beverage alcohol is allowed to serve as long as you practice distancing rules.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Tony. We have another question. How would a restaurant use tap payment and the servers wouldn't get a tip if tap payment was being utilized, I guess is the question.
Well, that's a very good question. And I mean, they're hard workers, the servers, and somehow there needs to be, if there is a tapping element, that the tip is there. And one thing we'll do at the resort site is really elevate and evolve the technology parts of it. And it's something that I would ensure I look after, because I don't know the answer to that. I think technology, there's probably something out there that we can work around it, but I will make sure that I'll get an answer from tech experts. And by the way, if we don't answer all the questions today, Lori, feel free to send them to me, and I'll make sure we get answers back to you through an email.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. What I can share with you in my experience over the last couple of months is I have seen anything from large toothpicks to cotton swabs to popsicle sticks that people have in a container close to the cash register, where you can grab one, put your PIN number in, and then it gets thrown away. So single use in that regard. But I'm sure there will be more creative ways coming down the pipelines.
Yeah. I had a focus group with about conferences, because we are also going to create a guide for conference and meeting rooms. And I had the fellows from the Metro Convention Center, Toronto, Roy York, Sheridan, and you'd be surprised the little things we took for granted need to change, like a water station, because everyone goes and grabs the jug. The meeting room papers, they have to be packaged up. The cash bar has to have a glass panel of some type. It's things you will never even consider. And so we'll have a guide on that as well.
Terrific. Tony, can you just touch a little bit more on the protocols for washrooms for restaurants and how frequently they're going to have to be cleaned?
Yeah, and of course that varies depending on the size of washroom, but I'll answer that two ways. One is the cleanliness has to be done in a way, and you're looking at those toilet paper seats covers, they have to be cleaned often, and there has to be a protocol. There's no question about it. There has to be signage at the door, and there has to be something there that protects the surface of the toilet seat. Period. Has to be. There are already materials in the market that do that. I know there'll be more, and I would recommend touchless faucets and move towards that. That's what many are already going into. But as far as the cleaning part, I would just say often, depending how many you have, how many toilets you have in the washroom, because you can actually lock down one or two and open them periodically. But that's a toughy one, and it just will need constant upkeep, unfortunately. This is the tough part. Why, when you say you open at 50% capacity, are you going to make money to be sustainable?
True enough, Tony, and that's going to vary location to location. There is a question here about tip payouts. So normally tip payouts at the end of each shift are done by cash. How will cash be handled moving forward for the next foreseeable future, and therefore how is a tip payout at the end of a shift going to look?
Yeah, that's actually right now in review of finding a way that because we're talking about not cash now, not handling cash even, and we're going to see more electronic application on someone's paychecks, and that payroll is handled based on the employer's policy. As we know, recently, the last, few years ago, 3-4 years, there's a tipping pool allowed in Ontario for restaurants. And right now, actually, we are in talks with a few industry folks because they find that this is the time to get rid of tips altogether and create the European way of managing and have one wage, which is an interesting pattern. So this can totally change the process and basically answer your question when we get there. So this is under study right now. I don't know who we're going to get to that. At this point, everyone handles cash differently. There are businesses that still accept cash. Many don't, by the way. And there's some protocols that we are supposed to accept cash as a business. This crisis is bringing different decisions, even by governments. Something we're working with government right now is this 13-week layoff period for those that have laid off workers, and you have 13-day window coming up, or 13-week window. You either have to hire them back or you have to pay severance while they're reviewing that, and I feel comfortable they're going to defer that. Even the 35-week window, which will probably hit around November, if you start laying people off around March, I guess, mid-March. So back to the tip payout, there's a lot of needles moving at that, but right now it's just left up to each operator based on the policies they have.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Tony. Another one, can ozone generators be used for touchless sanitation with exhaust fans at the end of the cycle?
It's interesting. I have had some experts saying to us that it does work, and it's also sends a positive message. They are being tested. Our association was going to endorse one provider of ozone layers, but we felt it needed further studies. I'm familiar with him in my hotel career because we used them for people that smoked in non-smoking rooms or even in smoking rooms, and it worked. Good ones work for smoke. A couple individuals, providers that is, feel comfortable that they also work to get rid of any sense of human leftover, in whether it's saliva even, or whether it's in the air of some type, an airborne type of human leftover. I just didn't feel comfortable, and I'm not an engineer. And it was an engineer I was debating with. I've talked to the city of Toronto on that, and that provider is actually taking his ozone machine to the federal government to make sure he gets certified that it does remove airborne illnesses. I'm not confident in that.
Okay, fair enough. Tony, I'm sure you are taking your direction from the Public Health Department, and there will be more as we reopen and more businesses are allowed to open their doors to the general public in full capacity, or half capacity, I think, to begin with. But I think the biggest struggle for those that are on this call today and other hospitality operators is really in getting clear direction. I think to date we've had some relatively loose direction, as you mentioned earlier. Current rules really just stipulate 6 feet apart or 6.5 feet apart. It doesn't address some of the more specific issues that I think operators have. I know that the resource document you had mentioned earlier that is available on your website is one that will certainly help guide them certainly moving forward. I know from reading and listening to other webinars that the educational aspect with your employees is absolutely vital, and I dare say will be mandated by the health department. I think it's very important that that business owners avail themselves to any information that is available, as well as if there is ambiguity in any of that information, to reach out to the appropriate department, which in this case I think is the health department, to confirm anything that they're not really sure on. I will go back to the beginning of your presentation when you were talking about the need for everyone to start slow. I think it's probably in the back of everyone's mind that they just like to jump right in and open business up. But judging from some of the comments that I've had in previous webinars and conversations I have had with some of our partners who are reluctant to open for this very reason, that they're unsure what that opening process is going to look like. Starting slow, starting with the information that you have, that the government is going to roll out, and then looking out to other resources like ORHMA to help guide you in through some of those sort of gray areas that are out there. You talk about not cutting corners in sanitation, Tony, which you know, I think regardless of whether you're a restaurant or a hotel or a B&B, that's going to be key. And what I think is even more vital is the need for it to be visible to customers as they are coming in, so they feel a sense of security in coming into your business. You know, what's frustrating, I think, for many of us out there is the need for us to potentially be taking a step back into single-use products again. We've made you know, some stride pushing forward in looking out for Mother Earth and not using the single-use, whether it's water bottles or cutlery or plates or whatever it is. But it sounds like to some degree and for some time there may be situations where that will need to be the case and we'll have to fall back a bit. I loved your idea about a QR barcode for a digital menu. If it's a big menu, it might be difficult to manipulate on your phone, but I think it's a great way to get touchless ordering in place. And I know that there are many issues still going on regarding finances, regarding rent and landlords and loan deferrals, and that's probably the biggest issue, I think, for small businesses right across, certainly right across Canada at this point. Remains to be seen in some circumstances how that's all going to work out, but I know the government is continuing to work on those initiatives.
Yes, and of course the priority for Minister of Health is about the health system itself right now, and they don't see really the timing right now to meet on anything regarding opening. They feel that there's enough guidelines out there, and again, our guidelines have all theirs in there and best practices, and they're fine with it at this point. When I looked at other jurisdictions, there's very little in really mandating other than that 6 meter and the capacity rule. The temperature checks, there's not one jurisdiction that we found that has mandated it.
Interesting. I think temperature checks are pretty standard with health departments, I think, right now, Tony, anyway, are they not?
Well, pretty standard with health departments, but in other words, they're not mandating it in the business world at this point. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So a few more questions here. I work in a winery tasting room. Any advice on serving wine and having open bottles in the tasting room?
Well, I think if there is a way of having the wine dispensed somehow, unfortunately, listen, I'm a wine lover and I'm looking forward to my wine tonight. But if there's some way of dispensing it like they do in some of the host or cash bars, that it stands on a pedestal and the wine is poured underneath, there's less touching by the server on that. And gloves, I think in a case like that, although gloves can be debated if you don't use them right and if you don't sort them out in the proper way. I think that's the only advice I can give with that, because it's to try to find ways of not touching it and not others touching it.
Right. And I think just to expand a little bit on the glove use for you, I think the issue there is that people get a false sense of security wearing gloves and feel that they can wear them from food preparation to non-food preparation and go back, which of course is not the case. They need to be changed out each time, but
Exactly.
fair enough. Is there, Tony, do you know if there is financing available for B&Bs at this point?
No, I have not heard, again, anything specific for anyone, period, unless, it goes back to the rent, if someone is renting it and then in turn renting it as B&B, and all the other loans from a business view that have been released over the last few weeks. There hasn't been any specific for hotels.
Sure. True enough. True enough. Well, hopefully something will be pushing forward.
I hope so.
Okay, I don't have any other questions on here. A few more comments about biodegradable disposable plastics that are available. Of course, they are at a higher cost, but certainly are available. Glasses can also be sterilized by steam in commercial grade dishwashers, things like that. So I think, the basics of what we need to do, or hotel and restaurant operators need to do moving forward, most of it is already in place. It's just paying a little bit more attention. Wearing masks and things like that will be mandated from Ontario Public Health as we move forward. And I think in the hope would be that we're going to hear within the next week or two, and I say that with a question mark at the end as to whether or not restaurants can open and in what capacity. So it's sort of a wait and see situation. Tony, I'm sure if you have any information, you can share that with me as we push forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, terrific. If I would encourage everyone on the call, if you are not a member of ORHMA, to visit their website. They not only have the resources that are available that Tony spoke about today, but they talk to Tony. You didn't talk an awful lot about the advocacy that ORHMA does, but I know it's significant, and that you work quite tirelessly for the members and for the Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association in Ontario. So on behalf of all those owners and operators and partners, I appreciate the work that you do. I definitely appreciate you joining today. And one last question here. Cloth versus disposable masks, Tony, what's your take on that one?
Well, disposable masks probably easier because you're getting rid of it as long as it's a safe mask, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have something that you have with you all the time, again, it goes back to what you said, Lori, about the gloves. The chances of touching it and touching your face after you touch it will be greater. But if you take it and throw it away in a proper container, that's another item to look at. I would say the throw it. It's funny you said about environment, yeah. With plastics, get rid of them. It was just a few months ago that it's bad for the environment. Landfills, governments are ready to mandate it, and now governments are the ones that are bringing it back.
True enough. True enough. I think when it comes to masks, not only I'm sure will it be mandated, but it's an issue of perception, I think, with customers. And I think to a great degree, back when I was in the restaurant industry and gloves were coming in onto the landscape of restaurants, that it really was more driven by the perception of customers than anything else. So I would think that customers are going to be looking for maybe not medical grade, but certainly disposable masks that can be discarded and used.
With regards to masks, there hasn't been one jurisdiction here, looking at the other provinces, that has mandated it.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
they're
maybe
recommending when distancing is an issue to wear a mask. That's where it's at.
Right. True. I heard that this morning. Okay. So there's a minute left. So Tony, I want to thank you again for joining today and providing some inside information into what the reopening process is going to look like. There will be additional information, of course, made available through public health, through the Premier's press conferences, and certainly his website himself. But again, I appreciate you joining. Thank you everyone for jumping on this call this morning. I do apologize, we did have some glitches there. And Tony, you're a little blurry. I don't know if that's just my screen, but it's what you were saying versus what we were seeing that was most important. So I do appreciate it very much. Thank you everyone, and enjoy sunny day and a nice afternoon.